So here's what the strips will look like after they're trimmed. They've already been quilted, and we're going to trim the edges nice and even. So lay the strip on the cutting mat, and I'm going to trim off the excess batting on the end, which I'll save to use later on for my crocheted animals and dolls. Then lay the straight edge along the edge of the fabric. Use your rotary cutter. Trim off the excess, and then you have a nice straight edge. All the layers are even and straight. Just keep moving your template along. Keep trimming. And you will do this to both edges of the strip. So one edge is all done, nice and even, and just flip it around. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side of the quilted strip. At this point, you have all the strips sewn together. All the strips done. They're not sewn to each other. You have 6 separate strips, but they're all quilted. So we are very near the end. So here you can see some of the stippling design of the quilting. You can find all kinds of designs online. This is the one I use most often. Sometimes I do circles, bubbles, whatever you want to call those. And this is what the back looks like. So you can make each strip a different color, or you can make them all the same color. But she wanted the block pattern of different fabrics. And actually, that makes the quilt very reversible, because when we sew it all together, you'll see this makes a really pretty quilt in and of itself. The next step is to join the strips together. And to do that, you need 2-inch wide strips. And I just tear those. So just start with a snip. And then split. If you think it's not tearing evenly, you can check it periodically, and this doesn't have to be very precise. So just have a 2-inch strip, and I'll tear one of those in between each one. So I need 5 strips, torn 5 long strips, and my iron is heated up. So now I'm just going to press this, because it gets a little puckered when you tear it that way. So I'm just going to press it out. I kind of pulled off some of the strings on the side, so it's not too stringy. So when you tear, you will get strings. Alright, so this is a little longer than I'm going to need, but either have it too long than too short. Now, this piece you're going to double just over. Not exactly. You want this one edge to be just shy of the other edge. And just press it double. pressed double. And I'll show you. You can see it's just a little bit shy of the edge. And I probably would go ahead and do all of these at once. That way you're ready to join the strips, and then your quilt, once you join the strips, you're done except for the binding. So we're in the home stretch. Now we're ready to join these quilted strips together. So I have the top strip and the second strip, and I'm putting those together. Make sure that they're upright, and going the right orientation. And I'm going to put those together, faces together. Okay, top part of the quilt together. And I'm going to start in the middle. It really doesn't matter, but it's a good place to start. And I'm going to make sure that the sashing on the lower one lines up with the sashing on the upper one. And then match the top edges as closely as you can and pin that. Alright. Next block. Use the sashing on the top, sashing on the lower one. Line those up. Sometimes you have to pull just a little, and then pull this up even with the top. Pin it. And here we have this end. And check the sashing down here, and the sashing here. Line up the seams. That one may not line up just perfectly. That's okay. It's all right. Okay, then we go the other direction. And I'm going to line this sashing up with this one, the seams. And pin that right there. And next, match those seams up. Pin in. And then the edge. Making sure these match as good as possible. Pull it up to there. All right, now I'm ready to join the first two rows. So I'm going to start stitching right here. I'm going to take one of my narrow strips that we pressed. I'm going to lay it on there. You can pin if you want. As you know, I'm not big on pinning. Now you can see this is how you want it oriented. All right, one just a tad longer than the other, and that's the one you want down. So I'll go ahead and pin. And that's going to go just as even, as close as you can. Get those all together, all those layers. It's a lot of layers. So I'm going to pin some here. All right, it's all even there. So the raw edges are all together. So you have backing, batting, quilt top of one strip, backing, batting, quilt top of another strip, and then the doubled tape that we pressed earlier. And then I'm going to stitch about 1/4 inch. Not very much, just about 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 from the edge of this. I started stitching, a little string there. I started stitching. You can see how close it is. Make sure that you're catching all of the layers. Okay. So I'm going to continue stitching all the way across the quilt. As you can see, the first two strips are joined together. Now from the front, this is how it looks. I like to bring it over to the ironing board, a flat surface, and just go over the seam and make sure, since there were so many layers of the batting and backing and strip and so forth, I like to check it carefully to make sure that nothing got missed. On the other side, here's what it looks like. Here's the strip that we've sewn down. Okay, we've sewn these together like this. And there's the strip. It's sewn very close to the edge. Now, I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to pull this over. And I'm going to stitch along this edge, just top stitch very close to the edge of this. So I have my 2 strips at the machine, and I'm sewing very close to the edge of this tape that we made. Alright, so there's what it's going to look like. So you're going to have this contrasting stripe in between the strips on the back. I've done it on the front before, so once again, that's your choice. This is possibly the most satisfying step of the whole quilt, because once you get this done, you actually have 2 sections already sewn together, and the only thing left after this is to bind it. So your quilt's basically done when you get this done. So kind of pull as you go, and then stitch very close to the edge right here. Now there's a little bit of a ridge right there, but it's not a problem. It's not enough to be a problem. So there's what the back looks like after the first 2 strips are joined together. Then you add the 3rd strip, put front sides together, and then sew the strip on, top stitch it down, and half your quilt's together. Alright, I'll continue adding strips. I'm adding row 4 now, so you can see there's starting to hang over the side. It's going to get bulky over here, but you should have no more than 1 strip under your machine at a time, so that certainly helps to maneuver it. I have it spread out here to show you. I've joined all the strips now. There's 6 strips down. And the only thing we have left to do now is trim the sides and then put the binding all the way around. And once we do that, this quilt will be complete. And this is the back. So you see the strips, the little in between each one of the rows where we join them. I love this random block pattern on the back. I'm going to show you a little more of the stippling, the quilting, because you can clearly see it here. All right. So I'm going to go back to the ironing board, and I'm going to trim the sides just as I did each strip. Here we are back at the ironing board. And I'm going to use my long roller here. Now, these are not going to be exactly even, which means I'm going to have to trim off some on the edge, and that's okay. But we want to make it as straight as possible. That's the goal. So I kind of use my lines along the stitching. Start trimming. Just as a side note, I save all of the batting pieces. I keep those in a bag, and then when I do my crocheting, my little animals and so forth, for instance, this mermaid, I use the pieces of the batting to stuff those with, so I don't have to buy fiber fill for that. once you have them all sewn together, it gets a little harder to maneuver it. That's why I love quilting in strips, because only for a brief time do I have to deal with the bulk of the whole thing. So, one side is trimmed, turn it, and I'll trim the other side. I'm using the same fabric for binding that I used to join the strips, and once again we're going to rip these strips for the binding. And you can make the binding as wide or as narrow as you like. I'm going to make a 3-inch strip, which will make a fairly narrow binding. That's what I like. I don't think this is going to be long enough, so I'm going to have to piece it. That's alright. It is a quilt, and quilts are made up of pieces. So 3 inches. So I sewed one smaller strip onto the long one. This is for the side because I knew it was not going to be long enough. Okay, I'm just going to press this out. It's all pressed out now. And the next thing I'm going to do is press under 1/2 inch on one edge. And then I'm going to double it. So bring the edge you pressed over to the edge and press it. Do that the whole length, and here you have your binding. Now one strip of my binding is all pressed. So press under 1/2 inch on one side and then fold it over so that pressed edge is close to the opposite edge. And this is your binding. So next, I'm going to take one of the shorter pieces of binding, and that will go at the top of the quilt. There's the quilt top. So on the back side, I'm going to open the binding and the raw edge. Okay, the raw edge, this one on the bottom, is I'm going to sew that to the back side. And as I go, I'm going to kind of stretch it taut as I sew. So I'm going to go to the machine and sew this on. So I opened up the binding, which looked like this. Opened up, and with the right side to the backing, I've stitched it. Okay. So now I'm ready to take this off the machine and turn it over. Now turn the quilt over to the front. And where I press this is just going to flip over it like this. And then I'm going to top stitch right along the edge of this. When doing the next strip, do it the same way, just stitch right up to the edge of the previous strip. And when top stitching that, also stitch just to the edge of the previous strip. I hand do the corners. You can miter them if you want. You can look online, find some different ideas for finishing those. That's what my corners look like. And it is all done. So here's the finished project. So this concludes the series of videos on my method of making t-shirt quilts. I hope that you've learned a lot. I hope that you will try the project you've been putting off and wanting to do for a long time. If you have any questions or anything I can help you with, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll help you any way I can. And I hope that you will share some of the projects you've completed with us. I'd love to see those. Thank you for watching.